All right, good afternoon. But I will tell you that for the last few months, journalists have sent out a little bit of a prayer of thanks because every morning we wake up and Mr. Trump has created some news story for us. So that's very useful. But not everything he does has been seen as a positive step. Some of the things he has done have been surprising, some have been shocking, some have been criticized around the world. So today we're going to talk really about, all of you are business students? Okay. How many of you hope to study or work in America at some point? Nobody? After Trump goes? No, then some more hands are coming up, I see. So this is at the base of a lot of what we're looking at, which is that what is the impact of the kind of policies Mr. Trump has? Because it's all very well to wake up and see yesterday's meme of what Mr. Trump said and laugh about it and say, how can the American president not know whether Spain is in BRICS or not? But the truth is that the impact of the US policies and the trend in which they are going will have a longer impact. And we have seen this because in the first 4 years that Mr. Trump was president, he took certain decisions which may or may not have been approved of by the opposition, but when the other party came, when Mr. Biden came to power, he didn't actually roll back on them. So a lot of the tariffs, for example, that Mr. Trump put in the first tenure actually were never taken off. One of the biggest moves he made against India on business, does anybody know what that is? What did Mr. Trump do in his first term that hit India's business interests quite a lot? So this is it, that people don't remember this, but in 2019, he actually withdrew India's GSP status. GSP stands for Generalized System of Preferences. And what it was a status that allows you as a developing country to have certain, special quotas and have less tariffs put on you. So a lot of other countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, which are big exporters, have this status. But Trump withdrew it from India because he felt that India, even at that time, he felt India was a tariff violator. He was very upset about Harley-Davidson motorbikes and that kind of thing. So now that status was not given back when Mr. Biden came to power. So while we all think that Mr. Trump is very, pro-India, and in many ways he is, it's not all good. Now, in the last month, and I'm sure all of you watched TV or read a newspaper or saw somewhere the story of the tariffs that Mr. Trump has put around the world. He gave it a name. He called it Liberation Day. It's been now only a few weeks. Does anyone remember what day was Liberation Day for the American? What day was it? Was it in April? So it was April 2nd, and today we're at April 23rd, 24th. So just 3 weeks ago, huh? But so much has changed since then. But he announced that there would be tariffs against all these countries around the world. Most countries he had put a number on. We now understand that it was that the tariffs were actually imposed according to an equation that doesn't make any sense at all. Because instead of looking at what the tariff values were, they were looking instead at what the trade deficit with a country was. So if a country, for example, exports a lot to America, then they would straight away go up higher in the tariff scale. It wasn't about what tariffs they were putting on American goods. Everybody would have heard about something called Heard and McDonald Island, which turned out to be an island which got 10% tariffs, but there were no humans that lived there. There were only penguins. So at the end of the day, everybody was wondering who the tariffs were meant for. But on the serious side, the immediate impact of the tariffs that Mr. Trump put on April the 2nd, and then he did it in 2 parts, caused just 3 days of market losses that were caused right at the beginning, wiped out $10 trillion in global equity value. That's what it did to the stock markets. It's about 10% of the global gross domestic product, GDP, and more than the combined GDP of the of 150 countries at the bottom of the pyramid. So you're looking at the kind of serious impact that Trump's tariffs did have. What was the impact on India? So there were several different impacts on India, and I want to get through them fairly quickly because I want to try and get to your questions, if I may. The first thing that has happened is the fear for exporters. A decline in trade demand will happen. Even if right away there is not a decline in the amount that India is exporting, and they're already seeing in some, like jewelry exports and certain areas of shirts, they're already seeing a kind of a decline. It's over time, because if there are no orders coming, or if Mr. Trump is going to insist on things being made in America, then obviously all countries are going to be hurt, but India included, because India does depend on the US for a large amount of its exports. The second impact has really been in the kind of trade talks we have opened with the US. So the US has said, and some of it is for the good, the US has insisted that we must cut our our tariffs in a number of areas, to which I believe at least 50% we are willing to agree to. Second, that India must open its markets when it comes to two critical areas which so far India has protected. Does anyone know which they are? What are the two areas that India really protects when it comes to markets? One is agriculture, which is, fruit, wheat, grains, all the rest of that. The second is dairy, milk. So you would have seen that when our negotiations with other countries have happened in Australia, Europe, and others, we did not want to open our market to too much milk and milk products. So we wanted to continue to put tariffs on those. So that's the second area where we are likely to be impacted. The third is, and this all of you will have read about, is the crackdown on immigration. So that is not just, so the first wave of immigration that we saw happening in the first couple of weeks of Mr. Trump coming to power was people being put on planes, handcuffed, and sent back to India. Obviously, at that time, everybody's first reaction was, well, if they went illegally, that's not good, and India has a responsibility to take them back. There was a little bit of unhappiness that they were put in handcuffs or that they were shackled, but in general, there wasn't too much noise. The second that you may have seen in the first few days was trying to cut down on naturalization of citizenship. So, for example, one of the first few executive orders Trump put was in terms of birthright citizenship. And of course, that's been held up in court right now, but the idea that you as an engineer or as a graduate would go to America, have a child there, but that child would not necessarily become an American citizen simply because they were born. So that has changed a little bit of how they define their naturalization processes. But it isn't just that. Green card holders are increasingly finding very strict rules on how much they can go out of the country, how many days before they can come back, and are facing inside, when they get to America and they are actually at the immigration, they're facing a lot more trouble. So that's the second kind that have been hit. The third, really, are students. And students, not just, so in the beginning, if you remember, the students who were being targeted and being deported and sent back were students who had taken part in protests, basically pro-Palestinian protests. And there was a certain amount of unhappiness, and even in India, there was many who were quite horrified by students being asked to be deported, taken into detention, deported, just for taking part in a protest. But now it has become much bigger. Now there are more than 4,000 people who have received already notices saying, please deport, please self-deport or we will deport you. Why? Because they've been found on a police case or they've had some kind of crime database, their name has come up. Now many would again say that is violating American law, so therefore they should go. But if you start doing a greater study, and one American immigration Lawyers Association did a study. They found 3 or 4 really interesting things. One, that 50% of those they surveyed, so what they did is they said, anyone who has got this report, this email, please send it to us because we'd like to study it. So they found 50% of those who had received notices to quit, notices to leave the country. And remember, some of them were like a month away from graduation. So some computer engineer in Wisconsin is a month away from getting his degree, and he's been told, no, you've got to leave, your degree is now canceled. So one, they found that 50% of the notices that they studied were to Indians, which indicates somewhere there is some amount of targeting going on. The second thing they found is that only 2 out of 330 or so that they analyzed had actually been sent that notice because of some political participation. The third, that the crime databases, now this is where it gets interesting, because the crime databases were not looking at some kind of important crime, right? They're just looking for your name showing up in one of the databases. And the US Secretary of State actually said that he was using AI to do it. So now, what ended up happening was, for example, there was one child who had a traffic violation, speeding tickets. In fact, there's more now with speeding tickets than any before. They have been asked to deport. There's somebody whose ID card was stolen. Somebody took a photograph or whatever and used that ID card. He's been asked to leave. There are 2 women, not from India, other countries, who were victims of violence. They were victims of abuse. And their name came up in a case, and they were asked to leave. So now the picture is becoming a little clearer and a little more sinister, if you ask me, about what is the impact of Trump's policies. And there's a reason why I'm telling you this, because I know the talk is supposed to be about trade, but it's becoming part of a larger pattern. Indians are the second largest group of citizens that are granted US citizenship legally. They have got a large part of the H-1B visas, and the third largest in terms of illegal entry. So obviously, Indians will be seen much more in all of this. But in all, there are now 7.25 lakh Indians who have been named by the US government as illegal or violating a visa or requiring to be deported. If they start doing that, that is going to have an impact not just for those Indians, but for everyone back here, because they will be coming back here. You will lose remittances, and you will lose jobs. So that's the next big impact that one should worry about and certainly watch out for. Then there is the issue of Mr. Trump's real interest in artificial intelligence. Everyone who watched the inauguration of Donald Trump would have seen that he put in his front row all the top tech, the tech leaders of the country, whether it was Bezos or Zuckerberg, or of course Elon Musk and all the rest. There is a sense that now AI is being encouraged simply because it is doing away with the need for bringing immigrants in. So in a sense, again, it's going to cut down the kind of job opportunities that are available. And why it's interesting is really when you look at the difference in the kind of immigration. So in the 20s and the 30s, I think a lot of Indians went to the US to work in farm labor, California particularly. In the 50s, there was a huge wave of those who were invited as doctors because the young men in the US were taking part in wars in Vietnam and all the rest, and they found that they didn't have enough doctors, medical doctors. So a lot of Indian medical doctors found jobs over there and have become big names. In the 70s onwards, you started to see engineering. So first it was hardware engineers, next it was programmers, software engineers, all the way to the 90s, where you saw then Indians coming into other social sciences and that kind of thing. Obviously there were different times, lots of different people went, but I'm just saying the large kind of wave that you saw was always to encourage immigration, particularly in a field where the US needed it. Now the worry is increasingly that the US is going to use AI to keep out more immigrants. And that is something that begins to be a worry for all of us. So those are broadly the areas where, so far, what we have seen, whether it is the tariffs Mr. Trump is putting on all these countries, whether it is the immigration kind of changes that they want to have, whether it is the kind of differences they're doing on AI and encouraging a different kind of technology in the US, these are all going to have impacts. And I'm talking about India, but obviously this is an impact for many around the world. What has India done so far? So India is seen as a model case because, in a sense, we have a good relationship with the US. We have not really hit back when it comes to the tariffs. We have actually begun negotiations with the US. We'll be probably the first to complete negotiations in the Trump administration. And as a result, there will be certain benefits. You know, the fact that we're not commenting, criticizing Mr. Trump, unlike China or other countries, means that we are first in the queue and probably will not be affected as badly. The second is that other exporting nations like China, Vietnam, and all the rest have actually been hit by much higher tariffs than India has. So as a result, if our goods are going to be a little cheaper, we might actually benefit when it comes to exports. The third is, and this is something you will deal with in your business studies, that India has been a protectionist economy. And that is slowly being dismantled, some of it being pushed by policies like the US's policies. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because it'll bring down tariffs, it'll increase India's ability to import, but also increase its ability to export, you know, be more interactive with the world and globalization. So these are all, you know, the good side of doing things. Obviously, there are downsides. And one of those is that India is now negotiating trade agreements, free trade agreements, with a number of countries. This is, by the way, another impact of Trumpian tariffs, that every country is now looking to diversify and to build as many trade relationships as it can. So how many of you follow trade agreements, trade negotiations, and all the rest? Come on, I'm not seeing a lot of hands over here, so I'm wondering if you follow the newspaper. But there are basically 5 of them that are in place right now. One is with the US, one is with the UK, one is with New Zealand, one is with Australia. And then there are the other ones that we are negotiating with groups of countries like ASEAN, Gulf, and all the rest. What this is going to mean is whatever we give the US, we might actually end up having to also give these other countries. So that's another big impact of what is going to follow from essentially a policy that has changed overnight. You know, it's not a policy that was consistently increasing, and so we were preparing for it. This is just Mr. Trump waking up one morning and saying, here's what I'm going to put on you as a tariff. Okay, I'll make a few exceptions. Okay, I'll start a few negotiations. But the impact will come first, and then the rest will go. Given that scenario, what really are India's strategic options? In one of these TV slots, I said there are 3 options. One is give in, one is give up, and the other is hit back. Now, hit back is clearly not an option we're using right now because we're not in the mood for it. We're dealing with Mr. Trump, and it's okay. You know, the vice president's been here and all the rest. We could just give in and say, okay, do whatever you want to, and essentially agree to whatever the US wants right now and then look at it later in the day. And the third would be to give up or just hold off and say, let's do nothing, at least for a year. And in 4 years, Mr. Trump will no longer be president. That's what it seems right now. In which case, then we can pick up the conversation. So one is really that we can negotiate directly with the US. The second option India has and other countries have is to go to the World Trade Organization in complaints. So about 40 countries have already gotten together and issued a statement together saying, we believe in globalized trade, we believe in the WTO. And India is not one of those signatories, but it is an option for countries to do, where you come together and criticize the US or push back against the US. That's the second. The third is to work with what are called global south countries. Developing countries, build your markets over there, bring down your tariffs for goods that they would like to export to you, and therefore be able to send more of your stuff. And then the fourth is essentially to work within the region. You know, India's one real, if you like, a lack of success when it comes to trade has been in its own region. If you look at the European Union, for example, European countries between them do trade of about 55 to 60%. Other countries like South American countries, African countries, in their regions, they do maybe 20%, 30%, and that sort of thing. In India's region, our intra-regional trade is actually just 5%. That's it. So that is another area where if we were to start building, of course, right now ties with Bangladesh are not that great, but if we were to start to build more markets in South Asia, which are heavily populated countries, that's another option for us to go. So if you were to take a larger look, really, what Mr. Trump has done in the last month through all of these economic policies is essentially what he's telling you. I mean, there are lots of little parts of it, and I've tried to give you some of those. The broader picture he's giving you is forget about the past. Globalization may go away. The past way of doing business around the world may go away. The idea that trade is going to be something that is unimpeachable. In other words, even if you have geopolitical issues, trade continues between countries. That is going to go away. We're going to pick and choose favorites. I think that is the new world that all of you have to prepare for. One where you are going to see a new way of doing business, which will be tied in very closely with relations that you have between two countries. And finally, what you are going to have to prepare for is to expect the unexpected. That whatever happens in the next 3 or 4 years is going to be something that will come out from left field, not necessarily something you're expecting, but as a result, businesses are going to have to learn to become a lot more resilient.